Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back once again to Today in African History with Baba Shaka. I'm Baba Shaka, and today is February 22nd, 2021. And it was on this day, February 22nd, in the year 1911, that one of our freedom fighters, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, joined the ancestors. Right? As a poet, author, and lecturer, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was a household name in the 19th century. Not only was she the first African woman to publish a short story, but she was also an influential abolitionist, suffragist, and reformer who co founded the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was born on September 24, 1825, in Baltimore, Maryland. An only child, Harper was born to free African parents, but unfortunately, by the time she was 3 years old, both her parents had died and she became an orphan. Harper's aunt and uncle, Henrietta and William Watkins, raised her after her parents' death. Her uncle was an outspoken abolitionist who practiced self taught medicine, organized a black literary society, and established his own school in 1820 called the Watkins Academy for Negro Youth. Frances Harper learned from her uncle's activism and attended the Watkins Academy until she was 13 years old, which was at that age, children were typically expected to join the workforce. Harper took a job as a nursemaid and seamstress for a white family who owned a bookstore. Her love for books blossomed as she spent any free time she had in the shop. By the age of 21, Harper wrote her first small volume of poetry called Forest Leaves. When she was 26 years old, Harper left Maryland and became the first woman instructor at Union Seminary, a school for free Africans in America in Wilberforce, Ohio. She taught domestic science for a year and then moved to a school in York, Pennsylvania. Shortly after she began working as a teacher, her home state of Maryland passed a law stating that free Africans living in the North were no longer allowed to enter the state of Maryland. I mean, that's where I live. If found, they would be imprisoned and sold into slavery. Harper was now unable to return to her own home. She decided to devote all of her efforts to the anti-slavery cause. Harper moved in with William and Letitia George Still, who were abolitionists and friends of her uncle. William Still became known as the father of the Underground Railroad while he was an office clerk and janitor in the office of the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society. Now, supported by the Stills, Harper began writing poetry for anti-slavery newspapers. Her poem, Eliza Harris, was published in The Liberator and in Frederick Douglass's newspaper. By the time Harper left Philadelphia in 1854, the same year Lincoln University was founded, she had compiled her second small volume of poetry called Poems on Miscellaneous Subjects, with an introduction by abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison. For the next 8 years, Harper traveled across the United States and Canada as a lecturer. After her first speech entitled The Elevation and Education of Our People, she was hired as a traveling lecturer for various organizations, including the Maine Anti-Slavery Society and the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society. In addition to her anti-slavery lectures, Harper was committed to the struggle for women's rights and the temperance movement. That's the anti-alcohol movement. She included her observations from her travels in her writings and began to publish novels, short stories, and poetry focused on issues of racism, feminism, and classism. In 1859, Harper published a short story in the Anglo-African magazine called The Two Offers. This short story about women's education was the first short story published by an African woman in America. On November 22, 1860, Frances married Fenton Harper, and the couple had a daughter named Mary. But unfortunately, Fenton Harper died just 4 years later. And after her husband's death, Frances Harper began touring again and formed alliances with prominent women's rights activists. In 1866, Harper spoke at the National Women's Rights Convention in New York. Her famous speech entitled We Are All Bound Up Together urged her fellow attendees to include African women in their fight for suffrage. She emphasized that black women were facing the double burden of racism and sexism at the same time. Therefore, the fight for women's suffrage must include suffrage for Africans in America. The next day, the convention held a meeting to organize the American Equal Rights Association to work for suffrage for both Africans and women. However, the organization soon split over the decision to support the 15th Amendment, granting African men the right to vote. Harper, along with Frederick Douglass and many others, supported the amendment and helped to form the American Women's Suffrage Association. Harper spent the rest of her career working for the pursuit of the equal rights, job opportunities, and education for African women in America. She was a co-founder and vice president of the National Association for Colored Women's Clubs and the director of the American Association for Colored Youth. She was also the superintendent of the colored sections of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania Women's Christian Temperance Union. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper died, returned to the ancestors on February 22nd, this date, back in the year 1911 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, I would like to share one of her poems with you. It's entitled Eliza Harris. For those of you who have read Uncle Tom's Cabin, the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, would remember Eliza Harris. She was the young woman who, along with her newborn child, fled in the middle of the night in the dead of winter towards freedom across the Ohio River. Eliza Harris by Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Like a fawn from the arrow, startled and wild, a woman swept by us bearing a child. In her eye was the night of a startled despair, and her brow was o'ershaded with anguish and care. She was nearing the river, in reaching the brink. She heeded no danger, she paused not to think. For she is a mother, her child is a slave, and she'll give him his freedom, or find him a grave. 'Twas a vision to haunt us, that innocent face, so pale in his despair, so fair in his grace, as the tramp of the horse and the bay of the hound, with the fetters that gall, were trailing the ground. She was nerved by despair and strengthened by woe, as she leaped over the chasms that yawned from below. Death howled in the tempest and raved in the blast, but she heard not the sound till the danger was past. Oh, how shall I speak of my proud country's shame, of the stains on her glory, how give them their name? How say her banner in mockery waves, her star-spangled banner o'er millions of slaves? How say that the lawless may torture and chase a woman whose crime is the hue of her face? How the depths of forests may echo around, while the shrieks of despair and the bay of the hound. With her step on the ice and her arm on her child, the danger was fearful, the pathway was wild, but, aided by heaven, she gained a free shore, where the friends of humanity opened their door. So fragile and lovely, so fearfully pale, like a lily that bends to the breath of the gale. Save the heave of her breast, the sway of her hair, you'd have thought her a statue of fear and despair. In agony close to her bosom she pressed, the life of her heart, the child of her breath. Oh, love from its tenderness gathering night had strengthened her soul for the dangers of flight. But she's free, yes, free from the land where the slave, from the hand of oppression, must rest in the grave, where bondage and torture, where scourges and chains have placed on our banner indelible stains. The bloodhounds have missed the scent of her way. The hunter is rifled and foiled of his prey. Fierce jargon and cursing with clankers of chains make sounds of strange discord on liberty's plains. With the rapture of love and fullness of bliss, she placed on his brow a mother's fond kiss. Oh, poverty, danger, and death she can brave, for the child of her love is no longer a slave. Eliza Harris by Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Once again, I would like to give a special shout out to President Baba Mosi and the sisters and brothers of the Woodson Banneker Jackson Bay Division number 330 UNIA ACL Rehabilitating Committee. That's the Universal Negro Improvement Association, originally founded by the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey and the African Communities Leagues, who are helping to promote these daily lessons on their Facebook pages. Our goals are the same, and that is to enlighten African people to the glorious history and the glorious past and present. So, for those of you who have already become subscribers, we thank you, we thank you, we thank you for your continued support. For those of you who have not yet subscribed, please feel free. We urge you to hit that subscribe button and join the family, become a subscriber. Please like and comment. Well, most of all, most importantly, please share, especially with the young amongst us. All right. So this is Baba Shaka with Today in African History. Until tomorrow, inshallah. Masalam.